Today we are going to be solving equations with variables or letters on both sides of our equation. So far we've talked about our steps to solving, but we've only talked about undoing addition and subtraction and undoing multiplication and division. Today we're adding in step 3 to our process, to our steps of solving. So looking at this equation above, if I'm walking through my steps, I do not have anything to distribute. And if I look at each side of my equals, on the left side, I just have a 5p, so there's nothing to put with it. And on the right side of my equation, 24 minus 3p cannot go together either because they are not like terms. So I do not have to do step 2 either. Step 3 says get all variables or letters to one side of the equals. If I look at my equation, I have a p on the left side and on the right side. So I want to get my letters all to one side of my equation. So basically, I want 0 letters on one side. So I want to get, let's say I want to move all my letters to the side with the 5p. I want to move that 3p to the other side of my equation. So I want this 3p right here to become 0. Right now, it's a negative 3p. So I'm going to add 3p to it in order for it to become 0. So negative 3 plus 3p becomes 0, so it cancels. And as we know, if I do one thing to one side of the equation, I have to do it to the other side of the equation. So I'm going to add 3p to the other side of my equation. And I can put those two together. 5p plus 3p would give me 8p. And on the other side, I'm left with 24. So I'm done with step 3. Step 4 says undo any addition or subtraction, which I do not have in my equation, so I don't need to do that step. Step 5 says undo multiplication or division. I have in my equation an 8p, and we know that since they're smashed together, 8 is being multiplied times p. So to get rid of it, I need to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide both sides of my equation by that 8, leaving me with p equals, and when I do 24 divided by 8, it's going to leave me with 3. So my answer is p equals 3. Let's try some more examples where we have variables on both sides. So again, I'm going to always draw my line down my equals so I can see both sides of my equation, and I'm going to walk through my steps. The first step says distribute. I do not have anything to distribute, so I do not need to do that step. Step 2 says combine like terms on each side of the equals. On this side of my equals, I have a 10 minus 4x. Those are not like terms. This side, I just have a negative 9x, so I do not need to do step 2. Step 3 says get all variables or letters to one side of the equals. So I'm going to do that. I'm always going to move my variables to the left side of my equation. So remember, when I want to get my letters to one side, I want it to become 0. I don't want any x's or letters on that side of my equation. So since it's a negative 9x, if I add 9x to it, negative 9x plus 9x would give me 0. And if I do it to one side of my equation, I have to do it to the other side of my equation. Now, when I write it on the other side, I'm going to put it underneath this minus 4x because those are like terms. The x's can go together. So I'm going to bring down this 10 and I'm going to combine those like terms. Negative 4 plus 9 would give me a positive 5. And don't forget that x. So I'm done with step 3. All my letters are on one side of the equation. Now I want to undo anything by adding or subtracting. So I see a positive 10 all by itself. So in order to get rid of that positive 10 and make it 0, I know I can do 10 minus 10 because that would become 0. And if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side of my equation. So let's see what I'm left with. I'm going to bring down this positive 5x equals, and 0 minus 10 leaves me with a negative 10. Done with step 4. Step 5 says undo multiplication or division. Right now I have 5 times x. So to get rid of it, I'm going to do the opposite and divide by 5 on both sides of my equation, leaving me with x equals, and negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. And I got my x all by itself, so I am done. All right, let's look at another example. Step 1 says to distribute. I don't see any parentheses, so I don't need to do that. Step 2 says combine like terms on each side of my equals. On this side, I have a 3x minus 7. Those don't go together. And on this side, it's just a 2x. So I have no like terms to combine on either side. Step 3 says get all variables or letters to one side of the equals. So let's do that because I see an x on the left side and the right side. Remember, in order to do that, we want our x's to be 0 on one side of the equation. So I'm going to move all my letters, all my x's, to the left side. So I have a 2x, and if I do 2x minus 2x, that would give me 0 x's on that side. And I'm going to do it to the other side of the equals to be fair. And remember, I want to put it underneath what it can go with. The 2x can go with the 3x, so I'm going to put it underneath the 3x. All right, 3x minus 2x would leave me with a 1x, or just x. I don't even need to write the 1. And let's bring down that minus 7. So now I have all my letters to one side. I'm done with step 3. Step 4, undo addition or subtraction. I see x minus 7. So if I do the opposite and add 7, negative 7 plus 7 would become 0. That's what we wanted. And if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side of my equals. So I'm left with x equals, and 0 plus 7 leaves me with 7. And I have my x all alone, so I don't even need to do step 5. All right, let's do another one. Draw your line down your equals. Our first step says distribute. I don't see any parentheses, so I don't need to do step 1. Step 2 says combine like terms on each side of my equals. On this side, there's just a 2y, negative 2y. And on this side, there's a 3y plus 10, but those cannot go together. They are not like terms. So don't need to do step 2. Step 3 says get all letters or variables to the same side. So let's do that. Let's make that y on this side become 0. I don't want that y on that side. And right now it's a positive 3y. So if I do 3y minus 3y, that would become 0. And if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side of the equal. So I'm going to do it on the other side as well. Be careful with these negatives. Make sure you're using your calculator. Negative 2y minus 3y. That would leave me with a negative 5y. Be careful how you type that. And I'm going to bring down a positive 10. So now I have all those letters to one side of my equation. Now it said undo anything by adding or subtracting. But right now it says I have a negative 5y, or negative 5 times y. So there's nothing that I could add or subtract. But since it is multiplying, I'm going to undo it by dividing by that negative 5 on both sides of my equation. So my 5 is gone, and I'm left with just y equals, and then 10 divided by negative 5 is a negative 2. And my y is all by itself, so I am done. All right, walking through our steps again. Draw your line down your equals. Our first step said distribute. I don't see any parentheses, so I don't need to do that today. My next step says combine like terms. On the left side, I just have a 5x, so I can't put that with anyone on that side. And on the right side, it's 2x minus 1, but those are not like terms, so they can't go together. So I don't need to do step 2. Step 3 says get all variables or letters to one side of our equals. So I see I have an x on the left and on the right side of my equals. So I'm going to get rid of an x on one side. I want the x over here to become 0. I don't want x's on that side of my equation. So in order to make that 2x become 0, if I do 2x minus 2x, that would be 0. Now I need to be fair, I got to do it to both sides of my equation, so I'm going to do that. 5x minus 2x would leave me with 3x. And on the other side of my equals, I'm just left with a negative 1. Make sure you bring that down. So now I have all my letters to one side. I'm done with step 3. Step 4 says undo anything by adding or subtracting. So I see a 3 times x since they're smashed together. So I don't have anything I could add or subtract. But since it was multiplying, I'm going to do my last step, which says undo multiplication or division. So I'm going to do the opposite and divide both sides by 3. Now if you need to use your calculator here, let's do it. It says negative 1 divided by 3. Oh, it's a decimal. So make sure whenever you have a decimal, you change it and make it into a fraction by hitting math, enter, enter in your calculator. And it looks like when I did that, it stays negative 1 over 3. We're going to leave it as that fraction right there. All right, let's do another example. Here we go. Draw your line down your equals. Going through my steps, my first step says distribute. I do not have any parentheses, so I don't need to distribute anything. My next step says combine like terms on each side of the equals. So on this side, I have a 3x plus 4. Those are not like terms. It's an x and a number, so they can't go together. On this side, it's a 6x plus 10. Again, they're not like terms, so they can't go together. So I don't need to do step 2. Step 3 says get all variables or letters to one side of the equals. So let's do that. I don't want any letters on this side of my equation, so I want that x to become a 0 right there. Since it's positive 6x, I'm going to subtract 6x because 6x minus 6x is 0. And if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side of my equals. I'm going to put it underneath the x because those are like terms. 3x minus 6x would leave me with negative 3x. And I'm going to bring down our plus 4 And on the other side of the equals, we're just left with a positive 10 now. So we got all our letters to one side of the equals. Step 4, undo addition or subtraction. So right now I see a -3 times x and a +4. So I'm going to get rid of that 4 all by itself. And I'm going to do that by doing -4. Because +4 minus 4 becomes 0. And I'm going to do it to both sides of my equation. So we're left with a -3 times x equals 10 minus 4 equals 6. So done with step 4. Step 5 says undo any multiplication or division. We just said that this was multiplying, so I'm going to undo it by dividing by -3 on both sides of my equation. So x equals, and 6 divided by -3 is -2. And my x is all alone, so I'm done. All right, draw your line down your equals. Step 1 says distribute. We do not have any parentheses, so I do not need to do that. Step 2 says combine like terms on either side of my equals, so let's check. 6 minus 2h, those are not like terms. On this side, we have 6h plus 2. Those are not like terms either, so we do not have anything to do for step 2. Step 3 says get all variables or letters to one side of our equals. So I want this h, this letter, to become a 0 over here. I don't want that h on that side of the equation. So in order to make that happen, it's a positive 6h. So if I do 6h minus 6h, that would become 0. And if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other. I'm going to put it right here so my h's can go together. They are like terms. So let's see what we're left with. I have a 6, and then it was a -2 minus 6. Use that calculator if you need to. -2 minus 6 gives us -8. And don't forget that h. And then on this side of the equation, those h's are gone, so I'm just left with a +2. So now I have all those letters to one side of that equals. So now I need to undo something by adding or subtracting. So let's see right now. I have a 6 all by itself minus an 8h, which means these two are multiplying since those are smashed together. So the only thing I could either add or subtract would be that 6, since it's not being multiplied times anything. So since it's +6, if I do 6 minus 6, that would be 0. And I need to do it to both sides. So let's see what we have left. I have a negative, don't forget that negative, -8 times h. And 2 minus 6 is a -4. So I'm done with adding and subtracting, and now I need to undo by multiplying or dividing. I have that -8 times h, so I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide by that -8. So now I have h equals, use that calculator, -4 divided by -8. Oh no, it gives us a decimal. So hit that math, enter, and make it into a fraction, which gives you a +1/2. So now we have h all alone, so we are done. Last problem and variables on both sides. Let's draw our line down that equals. First step says distribute. I do not see anything to distribute where there's no parentheses. So I'm going to cross that out. Step 2 says combine like terms on each side of the equals. So let's see on this side, I have a 4x plus 3. This has an x and this doesn't, so they can't go together. 1 minus 2x, those are not like terms either. This one's just a number and this one's an x. So I can't do any like terms on either side together. Step 3 says get variables to one side. So let's get all those letters to one side. I don't like this minus 2x over here. I want that to be 0. So to get rid of it, it's a negative 2x. If I add 2x, negative 2 plus 2, that would become 0. Perfect. And if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side. And when I write it on the other side, I'm going to put it underneath that 2x so they can go together. So let's see what we have left. 4x plus 2x is a 6x. And then I have a plus 3 equals, and over here I'm left with 1. All right, so all our x's are on one side. We're done with that step. Our next step says undo anything by adding or subtracting. So I see I have a plus 3, and then that 6 is smashed up against the x, so they're multiplying. So I'm going to get rid of that positive 3. Positive 3 minus 3, that would be a 0. So those cancel. I got to do it to both sides, remember? So I'm going to subtract 3 on the other side. So I have a 6 times x equals, and 1 minus 3 is negative 2. So I'm going to cross out I did anything by adding or subtracting. So we're just left with that 6 times x. So that's our last step. Undo that multiplication or division. So I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide by 6. Again, use that calculator for me. Negative 2 divided by 6. Oh, we got a decimal, so hit math, enter, enter. And we get negative 1 over 3. And our x is all alone, so we are done.